It's arguably one of Jobim's most famous compositions, and one that every musician should have memorized, along with a plan of action on how to solo over. In this video, you're going to get a map of useful targets over the jazz standard, the Girl from Ipanema. Hi, my name is Jason Klobnak, and I'm a jazz trumpeter from Denver, Colorado that helps musicians find a better way to improvise. If you're looking for a quick jazz improv tip that will help your soloing, then you've come to the right place. When the calendar flipped over to 2021, many of us looked at what we accomplished and what we didn't get done. One thing that's been on my resolution list every year is to learn more standards that I don't know, revisit ones that are forgotten, and to be able to play ones that I'm familiar with in keys that don't usually get called. So I wanted to invite you into this journey with me. I can hear some of you scoffing through your screen right now. Seriously, Jason, you don't already have the Girl from Ipanema memorized and worked out? How can you call yourself a jazz musician? I know. Believe me, I know. There are hundreds of must-know standards out there. This is definitely one of them, along with some other famous Jobim tunes. But this is one that I've skated by not fully internalizing. The A sections I've had down for years because that's the part that everyone knows. It's in movies, commercials, and a whole lot more. The bridge, not so much. So this week I put my head down and got to it. So let's map it out. This is an important process of learning a new tune or getting under the hood of an unfamiliar progression. If you drive your vehicle from one destination to another often enough, you'll get familiar with how to get there and what alternate routes you can take if there's traffic or roadblocks. The same is true for improvisation. If you've played through the same chord progression often enough, you know how to get around. However, if you're in a new city or there's a chord progression that you're unfamiliar with, you may want to map it out or have some type of GPS guide you. For me, the less I have to think about when navigating something new, the better. Don't get bogged down with too many options to start. The more familiar I become with something, the more I can expand my options. So when you're driving in a new city, for example, you want to know how to get from point A to point B. You're not too concerned on that first trip or two about alternate routes. I like to take the same approach to mapping out new or unfamiliar chord changes. When I map out a new progression, I will look for commonalities between the chords. Are there key areas or key centers? Can multiple chord changes share the same or similar pattern? If there are commonalities, I will explore those avenues first. Then I'll make a simple map of targets that I'm going to aim for along the way. In the Girl from Ipanema, it's not like other standards with easily identifiable key areas and diatonic 2-5-1s. Are we in the key of F? Yes, at least to start. Then, as in many Jobim tunes, he shifts them around. We could break the whole song down with a harmonic analysis and talk about the concepts like Neapolitan chords and modal interchange. But let's be honest, that can take you deep into the woods. There's plenty of other resources and arguments, websites, YouTube videos that are out there that you can explore on your own. I'm more interested in how we can navigate the chord changes as a soloist. One navigation tool actually helps us out on the bridge. Because so many of the changes last 2 measures, I'm going to treat the first measure of a chord change as a target and make the second measure as a lead-in to the next chord change. This allows me to create 2 and 4 bar phrases by connecting targets together. That means outside of recognizing key areas, I'm looking for common tones or notes that are a whole or half step between the other non-diatonic chords. The challenge with that, like honestly in any other solo, is to make the ideas cohesive and not sound like I'm gluing a bunch of random licks together. Okay, but first, let's start with the key areas. The A section starts in F major. has a dominant 2 sharp 11 chord, then moves into a 2-5-1 in F major. But instead of the standard 5 chord, Jobim uses a tritone substitution. If you're not sure what that means, I have a link in the description below that talks about what they are. There's a lot of tools you can use to navigate that, but anything that functions like a 5 chord means that we're adding tension. Tension means it begs to be resolved. In this case, I'm not picking a target on the 5 chord. I'm using those measures as points of tension to resolve into the F major chord. Improvisation is a balancing act of creating tension and resolution. Now, on to the tricky part of the bridge. Are there any key areas? Arguably, yes. There's definitely some 5-1 relationships in G minor towards the end of the section. The rest, though, doesn't have any traditional diatonic cadences. The other chords are not resolving in a diatonic way that most are accustomed to. This is why I'm going to treat them as 2-bar phrases, as I alluded to just a minute ago. So I'll pick my targets on the first measure of each chord change, then superimpose a 5 chord that leads into the next. Superimposition is a fancy word for placing a different chord on top of an existing progression. Rhythm section players do this all the time. For soloists, this allows us to create more tension by implying a chord that resolves into an existing one. Here's my map of targets I'm intending to hit along the way. You might notice that in some measures, I have more than 2 targets picked out. For me, these give me more options of things to aim for in the moment. If mapping targets is new to you, keep it simple. Pick 1 or 2 to start. The A section to me is mostly using macro targets of the F majors 1, 3, and 5. So that's F, A, and C. Then I'm adjusting the next closest micro targets or chord tones on the chords that aren't diatonic to F major. For instance, the B and C sharp on the G7 sharp 11 chord and the B flat on the G flat 7 sharp 11 chord. As you can see on the B section though, the targets aren't diatonic but rather chord tones, mostly thirds and sevenths as they help identify the quality of the chord, and that means major chord, minor chord, dominant, that type of thing. But there's a few where I have the 9th or 5th too. The reason is half or whole step motion down between the difference in the target from one chord change to the next. I'm trying to give myself options, things to aim at. This is my alternate map for the B section. It's a reminder of what I can do the second measure of each chord change by doing the 5 of whatever chord I'm going to next. Each of those reminders are in parentheses. You can see right here I have made an F sharp 7 as that would be the 5 of B. Then this C sharp 7 as the 5 of F sharp, and A7 as the 5 of D. However, you'll notice there's no superimposition between the D7 chord and the G minor 7 chord. That's because that is the 5 chord of G minor. As we keep going though, the B flat 7 is the 5 of E flat, and the E7 is the 5 of A minor. The last 4 measures are diatonic, and I can use some of the same processes, tools, and targeting principles that have been covered in other videos and in my members area. There's some links in the description below if you'd like to check them out. One more map. Since we just finished talking about superimposition and 5 of 5s, I want to show you something that I really like doing in major keys and what I will probably end up doing on the A section to the Girl from Ipanema. If you notice, I have a C major triad on top of this F major 7 chord. This is an upper extension triad, which means I'm creating a triad separate from the original key. In this case, it's the 5 chord of F. So that C represents the 5 of F, the E represents the 7, and the G represents the 9. But if I treat it as if it were its own key area, now this G7 sharp 11 chord makes even more sense because that's the 5 of C. This is something I really enjoy using over major chords, is implying the 5th. It works really well when you use the pentatonic scale because now a lot of those same notes are very similar to what we're going to find in the G7 sharp 11. We just may need to change some notes around. Whew, a lot to cover, right? We haven't even talked about tools to get to these targets. That could be another entire video all in itself. But instead of listing out some of my favorite tools to use on this, let's see if you can pick them out. I'm going to play a chorus and then give you an opportunity to try it out. If you recognize one of the tools I'm using, let me know in the comments below. I hope you've enjoyed this video and that it has added value or benefit to your playing in some way. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and that bell that's right next to it that lets you know when another video comes out. And if you know any other musician that might find this useful, you can share it with them too. Until then, my name is Jason Klobnak, and I'll see you on the next one.